Welcome everybody in. Hi everyone, my name is Nick Hool. I'll be kind of administering this conversation between Gary and Milena, but before we get started on that, as you're joining, if you could let us know who you are, where you're calling from, and what brought you today, that would just kind of be great to be a catalyst for the start of this conversation.
Yeah, just in the chat session there.
Yep,
welcome everyone.
In the chat would be perfect.
I'll just start with that and welcome everyone. I'm excited for this conversation with Milena, who's a longtime friend, collaborator, co-conspirator in all things entrepreneurship. So I'm very excited to have this conversation.
I love the last explanation metaphor. I like the co-conspirator.
That's right. All around troublemaker. But I'm eager to get this conversation started to talk about a European perspective, and that's okay. So we got some folks. Here we go. People are piling in there. Shiva from Atlanta, welcome. This is hi from Ottawa. Awesome, great. Christina. Okay, this is from Algonquin College. Yes. Excellent. Great.
Fabulous.
Great. Welcome, Christina.
Brittany from Virginia. All right. See?
Yeah, you can see. There you go. Brittany, okay. SIRCAP, welcome. Roanoke, yeah, we got lots of friends at SIRCAP. Tammy Page from Virginia, St. Petersburg, Florida, Chicago. There's Ernie. Welcome,
Hi, Ernie.
Yeah, Ernie's a longtime supporter of our work, as a facilitator, has sponsored many facilitators to come to our training. Great. We got Alexei from Moscow. Welcome, Alexei.
Yes, welcome.
Excellent. I want to see how many you have folks from, if there's anybody from Europe is coming in, right? That's what I'm trying to figure out, right? Is this all? Michelle, Mohawk Valley Community College. Welcome, Michelle. Alexei, welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is great. Great. So Nick, I want to give people a pile in, right? William Casey from teleworking from, North Carolina. Great. Angela. I can't read. These are popping in faster than I can read them. So anyway, Christina, framework manager. Great. Okay. So let's get started here. I want to welcome all of you to this webinar. This is, I think, our 4th or 5th in a series of entrepreneurship in education. I'm going to, I don't need to bother sharing my screen right now. I'll do that at the end. And I'm just really excited to introduce Milena Stoycheva, who's a great friend. She's doing amazing things in the entrepreneurship education space in Europe. Milena, welcome to the Entrepreneurship and Education webinar series. I wanted to start by telling the audience how you and I connected originally, like how our paths crossed in this space.
Yes, thank you, Gary. It's already the evening for me, but it's like the morning, because it's always great fun talking to you, and you've been somebody who's inspired me to really continue on this journey, because with our connection and when we met, I think you really made me believe that I should follow my gut feeling and stay entrepreneurial and be like the way I am. And you inspired me that I can call myself a fire starter and crazy dreamer, which is what I am.
Yeah.
So we met in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and it was the Global Entrepreneurship Congress in 2013. Remember?
That's right. Yeah, 2013 is 8 years ago. Marina.
8 years ago. Yeah. And I remember we actually met on stage. Maybe you don't remember. No, you were on stage, and after you gave the presentation, I thought to myself, I must go and speak to Gary. Okay, so there were a lot of people that were already lined up, and I decided I come to talk to you. And I introduced myself, and you said, "Oh, wonderful! I'm very happy to hear where you're from." And I said, "Well, I'm from Sofia, Bulgaria." And you said, "Oh, interesting. I've not been to this part of the world." And I said, "Oh, I'm so happy. I would love for you to come maybe in 3 months or 4 months." And you looked at me and you said, well, let's see. Yes, maybe we try. We have to plan it. Yes, but I would love to come. And then I remember we had a conversation in the evening later at the reception. And you told me, well, I think it's a long way. I don't think I can make it.
I don't remember that part of the conversation, but go
No,
ahead.
no. What happened? You were in Sofia 4 months later.
That's right. That's right. That's
Yes.
right.
No,
And
I'm
several
very
times
happy.
since. Yeah. So Milena, I mean, thank you for that. And you know, maybe I want to start like I want the folks who are on this webinar to understand like what the work is you're doing. But let me start with like the gut feeling. Like talk to me about that. You said like something I'm saying like resonated with a gut feeling that you were having. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, we've been having this conversation, you and I. What does it really mean to be an entrepreneur, and what are the things that drive people to be entrepreneurial? And what really resonated with me, and what I'm deeply convinced about, is the fact that being entrepreneurial is in fact being very human. It is so natural for us to be entrepreneurial. And the other behavior, not wanting to do something that is purposeful, not wanting to follow your passion or your dream, and believing in what you do and making it happen, in fact is a learned behavior. It's not something that is unnatural to us. So I've been wondering and thinking about this belief: are the entrepreneurs born or made? And my organization that I represent really believes that entrepreneurs are made, they're not born. But I think at the bottom of this is in fact something else. Because if entrepreneurs are only born, it would mean that they are people who don't develop, and that this is a super space extravagant power that we would have to be entrepreneurs. And it would be the opposite of this being a natural feature of us as human beings.
Yeah.
But they are made simply because in the process of discovering who they are, what they believe in, they make themselves into entrepreneurs. I mean, they grow as entrepreneurs. It's like the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. If we look at this thinking as entrepreneurs being only born, it means that you either have this flaw or feature or talent, or you don't, and then you're forever doomed to be a servant to somebody.
Right.
To me, entrepreneurship is about empowering yourself to believe, to be free, and to believe that you can do what you decide you can do, not what the others decide for you.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, that's so you were already sort of, I mean, we were like kindred spirits in that way. What I was saying in Rio was sort of validating what you already knew.
Validating, but somehow you also, how to say, fired it in me. You made me really decide in a way. I mean, after that, when I saw that, I decided that I'm really, this is my calling, and I can commit to this. And I have been preaching that entrepreneurship is a powerful knowledge about yourself, can be, and that it's a force which you can take on your side. And with that force, you can do many things in life. You can just have it as your coat of arms, as we call it sometimes, or as your superpower that unleashes the potential in you.
Yeah, yeah. You know, to your earlier point, Milena, I found this great quote that just lit me up the other day, and I found it in the most unusual place you would never guess, right?
Yeah.
It was in the writings of Karl Marx.
Wow. Okay.
Right,
Here we
right.
are. Yeah,
I
getting
mean,
on strange
it's like
territory because I'm.
you're going to find what you most need to find. You're going to find it where you least want to look, right?
Yes, yes.
And but what he said was that the desire to fulfill human needs through our own efforts is part of what makes us human.
Yes.
And that sort of speaks to your point. Like that's baked into all of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an important thing for people to hear, that it's the entrepreneurial spirit is the human spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's again, all of us. Maybe not everyone's going to start a business, but we all have that desire to contribute, to use our strengths, to use our abilities to contribute in some meaningful way, not just to collect a paycheck.
Yes. And Gary, if you allow me just to go one step further, in fact, entrepreneurship for me is equal to freedom.
Mm.
And since I had in my childhood experience with communism, I can tell you that I can compare it, and I know for real why there is that difference. Because when you are working on things that others decide for you, you can never be so powerful, or let's say so impactful. You can never be so convincing and so inspiring.
Well, I
But
don't think you can
when this,
self-actualize.
yes, and self-actualize, exactly. And that is why entrepreneurship is relieving and freeing oneself of the thinking and belief that you are here to do what somebody else has decided for you. Because with it, you can decide which direction to go and how to be in need, in support, or serving people, or even fulfilling yourself. Self-actualized.
Well, you know, I mean, I want to get to the education side of this, Milena, but I think this is a good groundwork here. You know, people say to me, you know, what is an entrepreneurial mindset? And, you know, I can answer that question. It might take me a minute because I have to explain to you what I mean when I say entrepreneurship, and I have to explain to you what a mindset is and how it functions. But the way to answer the question sometimes is, well, why don't you tell me what is a non-entrepreneurial mindset? Let me just turn this question inside out. Like, let's just call that an employee mindset. And I don't say that in any derogatory way. I say that to like, let's establish the context that the word entrepreneur arose at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
When for the first time in human history, we needed a word that would distinguish between the person who organized and operated the business and the person who worked in the business.
And now let me give you the European perspective. Yes. Because in Italian, the word is imprenditorita, which means somebody who takes on an exploration. And
Yeah.
isn't this related very much to the discovery? That is why when you are to study or to learn to be entrepreneurial, it's very important to first learn about yourself, to do the self-discovery phase, to see where you feel good and where you feel like you can really contribute with what you have, with your interests, with your talents, with your expertise, with your understanding, empathy, and everything to certain topics and problems. And then you start developing it. And that's why part of your process, the way you described it, is related to the discovery, how important that discovery phase is.
It is. And like, let me use that for a segue to get into the education part, because, you know, I think entrepreneurial learning is discovery learning. And, you know, if we zoom out, Milena, what the entrepreneur is when you look at the entrepreneur through a microscope, what you see is an organism searching for a way to connect with its environment, searching for some way to become useful. And it's experimenting, it's trying things, and it's finding something to be.
Exactly.
I mean, like that's how you think of it. But we think of learning in a traditional sense as the transfer of explicit knowledge.
Yeah. And
right?
not as a discovery of that knowledge.
There's no discovery skills involved. It's like you have to memorize this, or you have to prove to me that you understand it. Like, and that's fine. Look, you know, you got to know some things. I get it. I don't know how to make that any better. But there's no room for discovery. I mean, in a lot of ways, that's a relic of the Industrial Revolution.
Yep.
And I'm not saying it's one or the other, but I think we have to acknowledge that entrepreneurship is inherently a discovery process that requires discovery learning.
Exactly.
And so it's not a transfer of knowledge. So I wanted to ask you, like, what are the barriers? Like, what are you doing? Let's start with this question. What are you doing in entrepreneurship, in education, in Europe? And then what are the barriers that you're encountering? We'll get two-part question.
Yes. When I actually am teaching innovation and entrepreneurship at university level, but also for younger kids. And it's very interesting, that combination. I started by telling you that in Europe, the concept of entrepreneurship actually recently has been sort of rediscovered, because it was much more related earlier. I give this example. In the 15th century, the biggest explorer is Columbus, and he's seen as the entrepreneur, because this is the meaning of an entrepreneur in some languages, and it comes from somebody who is searching and who is undertaking who is an undertaker, in the sense that who is gathering a lot of people, uniting them around some vision, inspiration, and then is somebody who is starting a process of search, of exploring opportunities, exploring the world. And this was in a way, entrepreneurship was related on the one hand to the big discoverers and sailors and people who went to search the world for new lands. But it's also related to a lot of people with thinking, a lot of thinking that is outside of the mainstream, right, outside the box, and that in a way creative, or they're very open-minded. And if you compare, these are all characteristics that we are now discovering that they were lost in the educational system, and that we're saying they're becoming the skills of the 21st century, the most important skills. They're related to collaboration, they're related to being creative, to being critically evaluating the environment and all of the, well, these were all the features of the explorers, you know, open-minded in how they were thinking. Right. So Europe has been in the beginning very open-minded and very supportive of explorers and entrepreneurs. But well, I think in the last, let's say in the age of the Industrial Revolution, Europe became very risk-averse and very conservative. And this was one of the main differences, because I studied in the States and I sort of felt the American culture closer to me and the educational system, because I saw the obstacles to being entrepreneurial in Europe if you are not perfect. I mean, if you're not doing things in the best possible way, or if you are for some reason not very successful, then you would be condemned in a way. Failure was not considered a good thing in our educational system and practice. So we have had to come back to rediscover entrepreneurship and relate it much more, I think that's why I said, to freedom, to being open-minded, to experimenting much more in education, and not accepting that everything that you are being told is the truth value of things.
Yeah.
In being able to question what you're being told, and looking for many different options or scenarios through which you sift through and discover for yourself which is the best way.
Well, I'm afraid, Milena, I'm afraid that in the United States, we're now lagging.
Yes, and paradoxically, Gary.
Yeah. Nothing fails like success. Yeah.
What I saw, paradoxically, I don't know if it has to do with September 11, but because I've been almost every year traveling to the States. I lived for some time in California, and to me, I'm discovering that Europe is opening up more and America is closing. Yeah. And this is counterproductive to the entrepreneurial spirit. And closing, on the one hand, to the rest of the world, in closing in terms of not being empathetical with the values and with the problems of the rest of the world. And maybe I'm not going to be popular with what I'm saying now, but I'm being honest and truthful. And on the other hand, closing in terms of before, America to me was much more about really experimenting and giving space to people to try and not to be judged and evaluated as not doing good. And there are too many too many tunnels in our consciousness in understanding how we should behave, what we should do, how this should be done in order to be successful. And this always really burdens and overburdens I think the natural desire for people to do something good and of use to the others.
Yeah. So we got a couple of questions coming in, Milena, but I want to make a comment before we get to the questions. William and Alexei both have questions here in the chat. But like, it seems to me in the United States, and my perspective is primarily, US centric. But I suspect this is the occurrence throughout the world, that from almost the moment we enter school, it's assumed that we're going to be an employee.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's that. What does that mean? It's assumed that we're going to function within an established organization where the useful thing that that organization produces and distributes has already been determined.
Exactly.
And
And
so,
by the way, the journey that people project for themselves is always associated with a very clear pathway to working for somebody rather than developing something that would be of use to people.
right. So the assumptions are you're going to work in an established organization. The useful thing, whatever that is, has already been determined. So we don't need you to have useful thing discovery skills.
Exactly.
It's assumed that you're going to fulfill a predetermined by someone else role within that organization. So the point is the entire learning process is other directed and it's routinized.
Exactly.
And it presumes that you're going to work in a similar environment. It's other directed and it's routinized, it's stable.
Yeah. And by the way, this is very appealing to human beings, and it's related to the fact that we are looking for safety and security.
Well, that's right, and that's right. So you know, that's part of my point, that you just can't lay this all at the feet of education. Sorry. The delivery man is here. I'm sorry. Yes. So you know, it's these assumptions. You know, Milena, you've heard me say this in the past. That the European World Economic Forum has made this statement, like it's not enough to add entrepreneurship on the perimeter, that it needs to go to the core, right, of the way education operates. Okay, fair enough. We all understand that. So it's great that you have an incubator or an entrepreneurship curriculum in your, you know, somewhere, but it needs to be infused in the whole organization. Okay, we all get that. Now, here's a thought experiment. Are there any classes in any schools that say employee mindset 101? There's no such course exists. Why not? Because it's at the core. It's at the core. It's just infused in the whole system. You know, we talk about career paths and all these things that when I hear these terms, it sort of raises a red flag to me, because career path sounds linear. It sounds other directed. It sounds stable. And the world is anything but that. So we're preparing students for a world that doesn't exist. But to your point, which is a very good one, Milena, you know, it's not just being done to us. And what your comment gets at is this existential tension between our need for stability and certainty and our need for growth and vitality. And those two things are pulling us in opposite directions.
I see a comment here, which is really exactly capturing. William Beck wrote it.
Yes.
Capturing what I'm trying to say. And it is we can relate it to the natural desire in all of us to excel in something. And entrepreneurship supports this. So that's why it's more related to being a leader. Rather than per se business productivity per se, optimization per se. And that's why for us, the way we have started really in Europe, to me, one of the differences, two things. One is we're really focusing first on the mindset, and that entrepreneurship is most of all, or before everything else, is first the way you think. And so it has relevance to any aspect of life. You can be entrepreneurial as an artist, and find a good way to have all your paintings or your music be accessible and be shared with the people who care about that. You can be a teacher and be very entrepreneurial. What does it mean? You are simply not following something that else prescribes, but you're looking for the best tools, resources in teaching your students whatever the subject matter is. You can be entrepreneurial as a researcher, chemist. You can be the most entrepreneurial hairdresser, because you are not doing this for the sake of, but you're doing this with pleasure and with thinking.
You're not just abiding by the status quo. You're constantly trying to find ways to make yourself more useful to more humans.
And more relevant. And to me, Clayton Christensen says to do a job that is necessary to be done. I mean, to do that job that people need to have done by you. But it's more related to me to the point that while doing something, you are empathetic with the need of the people.
Right.
Well, that's why you're doing it. It's not because you are doing this so that you get paid. So the money is not the only goal and target at the end.
Right. There's got to be there's empathy. I agree with you. Is the tip of the spear. It's that's where it all begins.
I am starting to miss this in the US. The empathy. We're talking about empathy being critical in the process, but I'm starting to miss, and I think now I'm getting to the second point that I think.
Okay, well, let me just interrupt 1 second, Milena, and remind you of something Winston Churchill said. Americans always do the right thing after we've exhausted every other possibility.
Yes.
Right.
Which means, okay, this is a good thing, by the way. Huh?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. But just be patient; it'll pass. Is what I'm saying. So I want to get to the questions here. William Beck is asking you also: do you think there are connections between experiential education and entrepreneurship? I mean, let me take the first crack at that, Milena. But William, I think they are exactly the same thing.
Yes.
There's no distinction. That's exactly what it is. And I've been thinking about this in my writing lately. There are two fundamental outcomes from entrepreneurship. And one is developmental, and the other is economic.
Yes.
And one begets the other. You can't have one without the other. You can prioritize them differently. If you want people to start a business and generate revenue, you can prioritize the economic benefits over the developmental, but the developmental benefits will happen. And I think it's important for educators to understand that it's not just about starting a business. It's really ultimately about human potential. But it is, and William, when we look at what entrepreneurs do, how they learn, I've written extensively about this. It's experiential, problem-based learning, it's peer-to-peer learning, it's self-directed learning. That's what it is. So great question, William. Thank you for that. Alexei's got a question. Gary, Milena, do you, or before I move on to Alexei's question, Milena, did you have an answer to William's question?
Well, I answered with the leadership. I just said that he's captured very exactly what I meant. That it's related to developing yourself and to striving for excellence. And in that way, it's much more, it can be unfolded as a leadership qualities in addition to economic activity. And I don't see it. That's why there is a differentiation between the business administration and the entrepreneurial curricula that we're teaching, because business administration is really geared at optimizing that business activity to lead to processes that capture lead to efficiency, exactly. And efficacy is what efficacy, which has a lot of levels,
That's
is what
developmental.
entrepreneurship to me is, and it's related to leadership. It's related to personal development. It's related to also supporting others, and it is related to seeing and understanding yourself first, and then finding a way to maybe involve others or inspire others to join in that effort to address that big challenge. I mean, this is how I also explain to myself why we don't give up as entrepreneurs.
Well, Milena, I mean, I want to just dig into something like you were saying. I don't think of entrepreneurship as a business discipline. I think of it as a behavioral phenomenon.
Exactly.
Now, I could say that in a different way, that we're all entrepreneurs. We have to, like, let's go back to the fundamentals, right? We all live by exchanging. Like Adam Smith wrote that in 1776 in The Wealth of Nations. Every man lives by exchanging, right? Woman, whatever, right? And so, the question becomes, what is the useful thing that you exchange? And with whom do you exchange it? And then think about, like, what is the mechanism by which you learn how to become useful to other humans? What's stopping you from becoming more useful to more humans, right? So we're all entrepreneurs in that way, but most of us are just taught to exchange our time for money with a single customer. It's called an employer, and do whatever they tell you. And so when that employer goes away, we're lost.
Yeah.
And
but
Smith
Gary,
wrote about,
yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Smith wrote about that. He said, like, when your work is like routinized and other directed, I'm paraphrasing what Smith wrote, but when your work is routinized and other directed, we lose the ability to solve problems because they never arise.
Yes.
Right?
Because we have to uncover the problems.
And we see many people in the United States, many people with advanced degrees who are utilized, are working in coffee shops because they don't know how to make themselves useful with this knowledge in the absence of a known system. And that's what the entrepreneurial mindset is more about. If you're able to figure out how to make yourself useful to other humans outside of the confines of the known. And that's what you said.
I will go back to what, because I was listening to the webinar with Tony Wagner, and we've had this conversation. I will go back to what we've been discussing there, that in a way, the educational system, and in Europe as well, has been teaching us how to repair the deficiencies that we have, instead of being based on how to grow our good qualities. And in that process, of course, we would have some deficiencies and they will be maybe improved. But the difference is that the focus of the educational system is how to punish those who do not improve the deficiencies, rather than award those who do well with how good they are.
Right.
And in this regard, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial education, to me, is much more relevant and has an advantage, because you cannot evaluate with a test if you are entrepreneurial, with a quiz or with a test, how good you are at this. The only way you can do this is by performance, and by presenting, and by showing a real project. So showing something for real, not by memorizing
right
stuff
and regurgitating. Right. So let's dig into that for a minute. And Alexei, I'll get to your question in a moment. I know there are other questions in the Q&A that we'll just get to in a second here, but I think you're saying something really important that's often missed here in entrepreneurship education. And I'm working out some things right now about like how to like design principles for creating effective entrepreneurial learning environments. Like, what are those principles? And what part of what I'm working on here, Milena, it speaks to what you just said, is that the evaluation, you have to remove the authority.
Exactly.
And
it's not just an authority, it's in fact a punishing authority.
Well, that's implied. And so, you know, so many of these entrepreneurship education initiatives I see in the US are all about like Shark Tank, and they're trying to, like, they bring in a lawyer, an accountant, or somebody that's got a small business somewhere, and they decide they're going to evaluate the idea. Like it's the opinion of so-called experts. And like, that's not the way to evaluate it. The evaluation comes from the people whose problems you're trying to solve. And so I think
it comes from being validated on the market by the need.
Correct. It's like evidence of usefulness from the market, not from a so-called expert.
Yeah.
Right. The opinion of an expert doesn't really matter at the end of the day. What matters is evidence of usefulness, and that's really, you know.
And this is why we are teaching. So I'm running the Junior Achievement Organization in Bulgaria. In fact, this is not an organization just like any other. It is not a representative office of the organizations in the US. The way we describe our organization, it's a startup. It was a startup. We started from zero. We had $100 in our bank account, and we have been building this organization based on the need that people had for different type of education. And this education is entrepreneurial because it really teaches according to some other principles. Exactly what you said, Gary. Mm-hmm. And the principles are, one of them is evaluation is different. It is evaluation that comes from the users. It comes from the other stakeholders. It is not the teacher with a test that can determine whether you're good or not. And we're seeing that this is creating an incredible motivation in the learners that spills over to the other subjects, not just to what they are studying with us. And we're teaching them the company program, which is a model of learning by doing education, which is becoming more and more relevant. It's just one example. But it is validated by how well you can involve the others, how well you can be perceived. I mean, it's validated by the society.
That's exactly it, Milena. That's exactly it. And I love what you said. And we've seen a lot of evidence of that as well. Like, once students are able to experience, you know, entrepreneurial learning, which I would call authentic learning, it's self-motivated, self-directed learning. Like, it does spill over. I've actually seen research. A guy at Florida, I forgot what, Florida State, I think, I've forgotten his name. This is probably a couple decades old. Showed that students who take entrepreneurship courses, like, their other academic achievement in other domains increases, right?
We've done a lot of research in our network. You know, we have 40 organizations in Europe that are individual organizations, members of the worldwide organization, but and of course they have their own specifics. They share common values and sometimes common programs, but it really depends on how you practice what you are teaching and these programs, and how you transfer them on the market in a real way in the educational system. And one of the biggest conclusions is exactly this. It increases the self-confidence in students. It increases their motivation, and therefore it increases their self-actualization. That's why they succeed, because the level of satisfaction with what they do is higher.
I work with a university system in Mexico, Tecnológico de Monterrey. And this is one of the top 5 entrepreneurial universities in the world. They have 30 campuses across Mexico, 120,000 students. Incoming freshmen, they self-organize in groups of mi alma mater, Christina, awesome. The students, I forgot the name of this challenge, but the students self-organize when they come to school. The first assignment, 2 or 3 students self-organize in groups. They give them 1,000 pesos, which I think is about $20 US, something like that.
Yeah.
No other instruction, but go out and try to come back with more than 1,000 pesos. That's the only instruction. And I was at the main campus in Monterrey, and I got to interview groups of these students that have been through that. And they kept saying, like, the way this impacted their approach to learning was, I remember one kid said, he said, after that experience, I decided the teacher is no longer going to be the one who determines where the bar is. I'm going to master this material. I'm not going to pay attention to what do I got to do to get an A.
Mm-hmm. And by the way,
see,
Gary,
the locus of control.
What you were saying.
Pardon me?
Sorry, because there was a little bit of delay and I jumped. Please finish your sentence. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. All I was saying is, like, what's happened in the mind of the student, the perceived locus of control has shifted.
Yeah. From
an other directed learner to a self-directed learner. I mean, that's the holy grail in education, is it not? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, again, back to the design principles for creating effective entrepreneurial learning environments. You have to tap into the intrinsic motivation of the individual. And so that means that you have to lay down the tools of coercion and manipulation. You cannot rely on carrots and sticks. You can't rely on letter grades and gold stars and certificates, because those things actually undermine intrinsic motivation.
Yes.
And that goes right. So you have to appeal intrinsic. The tools of coercion are things that you need when you're trying to get a human being to do something that he or she might not otherwise want to do voluntarily. Mm-hmm. With intrinsic motivation, you don't need those tools. And we have to recognize that those tools actually inhibit intrinsic motivation. That's very clear in the literature, right? And so that goes back to your earlier point. You can't be the expert. You can't be the teacher. You have to be the facilitator of learning, the guide on the side, the coach, and so forth. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point, and I interrupted you. You were making a very important point about the ways that the tangential impact that entrepreneurial experiences have in learning. And the last thing I wanted to say is that, a compelling goal autonomously pursued creates a very, very powerful incentive to learn. I mean, I think that's the real power of entrepreneurship education. So, Milena, I want to come back to a question that Alexei has asked. Do current entrepreneurship education initiatives develop risk-taking skill? How do you respond to that?
Excellent point. This is in fact one of our big goals and fights, because you cannot, as we just said, you cannot really change that behavior if you don't change the disciplines and the approach in this, if you don't change the setting and the context. to make it more conducive and more lenient, let's say, not so punishing, you cannot achieve the other result. So you cannot achieve with the old measures the new thing, as Einstein's been saying.
Yeah.
And what I know of examples here and there, and but they're not yet mainstream. Of course, I think you have all heard that one of the most successful educational system is the Finnish one, and it's not by chance, because one of the principles here that it is encouraging play, it is encouraging freer time, it is encouraging lack of too much structure in the subjects and in the disciplines, which would then, of course, lead to developing more experimental and even risk-taking programs. We have a number of programs that are related to risk-taking. They're not only for risk-taking, but for example, this program, which is called the Mini Company Student Program, it is a real risk-taking program, because you can start and in the process you learn. You don't have a goal where the end goal is only to set up your team and to find a project to work on. But there isn't a predefined goal that you need to reach. If you don't reach it, you fail. So in a way, this is one way that you can teach risk-taking. Another one to me is very much related to how much experiments you can do in combination with the STEM subjects and put them within an entrepreneurial process. And if you encourage this much more, it is already, again, teaching risk-taking. And a third one is, especially in higher educational institutions, is to have courses that are related to really finding the need on the market of what you study and putting it on the market and trying while still in learning and school.
Yeah. You know, I want to answer the question a little bit differently, Milena. I'd like to get your opinion on this, but I think, you know, you mentioned the word entrepreneur, and just wait, you know, look at your watch, and within 15 seconds, someone's going to equate it with risk taking. And I think there's a lot of myth and misunderstanding embedded in that association. And I
didn't mean risk as the biggest risk. I meant that in every single daily activity, you can perceive it as a risk if you don't do it exactly in the way you're used to. Routinized. If it is not routinized.
Right.
That you don't follow a prescribed route.
But I think what people don't understand is that experienced entrepreneurs have actually shown to be more risk averse than non-entrepreneurs. And so there's this myth out there, the Richard Branson kind of screw it, let's do it, you know, kind of thinking. And that's not what it's all about. It's about micro experimenting.
Yes. And when we say risk averse, is not risk averse on that, I think, micro level, as you were saying. It's risk averse is that they're taking calculated risk.
Well, that's what I mean. But like, I think even the term calculated risk is a little bit
evaluated. I would put it evaluated risk. I would say evaluating and critically evaluating what you have and whether it's worth it or not. And sometimes you cannot evaluate. I mean, you cannot project and predict.
Right. It's really, you know, and I've heard thought leaders say this, like, the way forward is going to be through trial and error, not through expert leadership. And that's where we are in the world, I believe. Like we're kind of at the end of this industrial era where we go to work in an organization, someone else has figured out what to do, we do it, and we can have some kind of modicum of stability and a decent life doing that. I think those days are gone.
Absolutely.
And we have to learn, like how does an organism learn outside of a known system? That's what entrepreneurs are doing. It's lots and lots of little experiments. You don't quit your job. You don't risk your life savings. You start on the weekends. You start in the margins. You start in experimenting conversations. You're looking for evidence of usefulness. And so you can really take a lot of the risk out of it through this process that I call micro experimentation and adaptation. And to bring this back to the education, you know, what I want educators to understand is zoom back out to 35,000 feet. When you observe entrepreneurs, what they're doing is following the principles of the scientific method. That's what entrepreneurial learning is. I have a hypothesis.
Yes.
And here's what entrepreneurship is not. You know, I just published a piece in Forbes a couple of weeks ago. I wrote about this, like it's the Richard Feynman idea, Like the first trick is not to fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. So entrepreneurship is not, or should not be, I have a great idea. I'm so convinced of this idea.
Let me push it on the market. Yes.
Let me go mortgage my house, get money from friends and fools and family. And I'm just so convinced of this. I'm going to show it to the world. It's going to take off. Like that's gambling. That's not entrepreneurship. That's recklessness. That's not entrepreneurship. That's insanity. That's not entrepreneurship. But that's what's being taught.
Yes, but Gary, I think here one of the challenges is that there has been an use of certain words that are associated with the understanding of what is entrepreneurship only as a business activity. And then when you're trying to really unpack it, it boils down to you're again using some of these words, but you imply a different meaning to them. And this is why one way to really understand it, that I think that's one of the differences, for example, in Europe, the mindset and the thinking that entrepreneurship is beyond the business activity is much more popular than entrepreneurship as a business activity.
Yeah, see, that's where you guys are ahead of us. That's where.
And I think, but I think this is because we had shut off from being entrepreneurial for some time in matching the industrial age requirements to feel safe, secure, and you become complacent with this security.
Right.
And when you are entrepreneurial, you cannot be, or when you are doing these micro experiments, you cannot give guarantees that it will have this result or that result. You are trying, okay?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you are gambling, as you said. It is based on some understanding that you are probing here and there. That's why the MVP is more important than doing everything once you have an idea and you believe you can push that idea onto the market. Well, this is not how it works.
Milena, most of entrepreneurship education in the United States, at least in small business development centers in the K-12 education space, maybe less so in higher ed, but so much of it here is still predicated on the business plan.
Yeah.
And how is that compared? Is that happening in Europe as well?
I don't think so much, also because Europe has been learning from the US. I don't have a problem recognizing that US has been the leader in entrepreneurship, and it still is, and also in um, uh, business education, in MBAs, and Europe was modeling things based on what US was doing. But one of the features, because Europe is so multicultural, and people have to learn to coexist and collaborate. I think one of the differences in the way entrepreneurship is practiced in Europe versus the US. In US, it's much more individual. It's based on the individual. In Europe, it's much more on building an ecosystem within which you work, because we have too many small markets that on their own, and people there cannot be, if they focus only on that and don't try to collaborate with the others, they cannot be as successful.
Yeah.
And so systemic thinking is part of the successful entrepreneurial thinking for us and practice.
Yeah, that's where we're going to get beat at our own game there. So William is asking a question, Milena. How can faculty, staff working in higher education best model/advocate entrepreneurship in education? It's a really good question.
We are advocating entrepreneurship in education. And by the way, at the moment, we're running an experimental project. It's called Entre Time, and it is teaching professors from other fields than non-economic and non-entrepreneurship professors, with the use of entrepreneurial mindset, teaching them or training them, how to be entrepreneurial and how to support entrepreneurship in universities. And the simplest way is you look at the entrepreneurial process and you map it on any other subject that is there, on any other, let's say, domain space that is there. And you try to follow these steps of discovery, and it's related also to self-discovery. You try to support the practical, the learning by doing, exploration of that domain space. And this gives you a completely different insight, because it creates opportunities to find application of what you are teaching, and to put the professor or the educator in a facilitator role.
Right.
Not to be dictating and to be pouring, the wisdom into the heads of the students.
Yeah, I like that, Milena. I would also add, William, that like, I'm quite fond of Jaime Casap's idea of like, let's stop asking kids what they want to be when they grow up. And let's ask them what problems they want to solve and what do they need to learn in order to solve those problems. And I think, tying back to Milena's earlier comments about, filling in deficits rather than accentuating strengths, I think we should be asking students in every class, what are your natural interests? What are your natural capabilities? And how can you bring those together in a way that contribute to the greater good? How can you add value? And I found this little thing. It was an essay written by Seneca in 64 AD. And he said, it's the duty of a man to make himself useful to other men. And I'm paraphrasing, but basically, like, you have an obligation to make yourself as useful as possible to as many as possible, because that's how we advance the welfare of mankind. I think, and I know, William, that I'm sort of being broad and philosophical here, and I'll try to be more practical also. in my answer. But I think, to address your question, William, we have to address the mindset of the teacher. And there's something very important in education. It's the Pygmalion Effect. And I've forgotten the name of the experimenter that did this. But basically, the expectation of the teacher has an enormous impact on the student. And that has to be taken into account. But
and by the way, Gary, there isn't a better time now to do this, because the Generation Z, and we call this the Generation E, which is now in education and entrepreneurship. The Generation Z believes that you cannot, I will answer in a way, Alexei's question, you cannot measure everything only with financial success.
Correct.
And they are looking for ways to be motivated and to support the environment, to support some kind of a societal challenge that we have. These purpose. Are all of the ideas and suggestions for business activity or entrepreneurial projects that we get from the youngest generation. There isn't one single such mini company project which does not take into consideration the environmental impact of what they would do or the societal impact. And this already speaks a lot. And this is why when you are asking the students how, through what you're learning in this subject, in this domain, you can actually support a solution to some bigger challenge or bigger issue that you have.
Well,
this is when it becomes relevant and they're motivated to learn this and to study this.
Yes. So I want to come back to William's question. There's one more aspect of your question, William, that I wanted to address. And I think Jaime Casap's quote gives us a framework to think about it. But I also wanted to just add, the challenge we have is that the incentive structure in the university is not there, number one. But number two is we have to understand that entrepreneurial learning is interdisciplinary learning.
Exactly.
So we don't have those disciplinary boundaries. So, I think we should be always asking our students, what problems in the world can we solve for other people with this knowledge that we're talking about, that we're learning right now? Like that's an important a way to think about it. Alexei's got a question. One more question is money the measurement of entrepreneurial behavior or personal responsibility for being free equals entrepreneurial? I'm not sure I understand the question, Alexei. I think I do. Milena, do you want to take a crack at that?
Well, I tried to answer. I think he was referring to the fact before that we were discussing. I said, to me, being entrepreneurial is equal to being free. I connected to freedom. So maybe that's part of it. I don't think so. I don't think that entrepreneurial behavior can be measured only by money. To me, it's always with entrepreneurial behavior, you're always looking for at least 3 other different ways.
Well, that's what I wanted to trip into from your earlier comment, Milena. I'll pull it into Alexei's question. Is so many entrepreneurs that I've interviewed, it starts out being about the money. But then the entrepreneur, that's kind of how they start. Like, I'm trying to make a living, I'm trying to pay the bills. But then they realize, like, wow, I can make an impact. I interviewed this guy from Zambia, Paul Nyambe, who took our Ice House program like 10 years ago. And he said, I had $200 to my name. That's all I had. And I saw this problem that there was no clean market for selling goats. People just bought a goat from their neighbor and they slaughtered it on a log, and that was it. And he said, I bought a goat. I took it to a friend's butcher shop. We butchered it. We put it in clean sanitary, cryovac packages. And I took it to the local grocery store. And they called me back the next day and said, we want 200 more. And now, but like, so he started out, he had no way to make money for himself. But now he recognized like he can impact all these goat farmers across Zambia, across Africa, reduce the carbon footprint. So I think I think that happens to a lot. I've interviewed many entrepreneurs that articulated this to me. It started out as strictly driven by money. I wanted to make money. I didn't have any other way to make money. But then once I realized that I can actually make an impact, my priorities shifted. So they don't always come to it with the altruistic intentions or the purpose component at the onset. And I know we've got some other questions, Milena, in the Q&A. So, and Nick, can you kind of hit those for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Michael's asking, I'll start with his last comment because it gives context for the actual question. He says, I attended your conference in Brussels in 2017 and noticed that the focus was on the JA Company of the Year competition. And he's saying he would like to see maybe more of a focus or a shift to entrepreneurial mindset training. So his actual question is, why or how is Junior Achievement Europe so focused on having an entrepreneurial business rather than firstly having the mindset, as we've been talking about throughout this whole conversation?
Yes, in fact, this has been a discussion within our network. And I am one of the well-known, not always people
Renegade.
who don't know radicals, sorry, innovators, I would put it, because this is the discussion in the sense that we are really following a different position. We are looking for finding a way to use the mini company program not as a business activity to be rewarded with the biggest financial achievement, but we have always said that we are rewarding innovative solutions. And we have a pre-accelerator at the moment that focuses on 3 thematic areas, which is, we believe, where we differentiate with the business activity only. And it is, we are focused on green entrepreneurship and circular economy, which is a very big thing in Europe, and is going to start picking up. We are focused very much on innovations in healthcare and medicine. And the third one is of different types of new smart solutions. They may not be necessarily only high tech for smart cities. So I think if I can answer that, there are different measures. Definitely for us, and our understanding is that the financial and the money is one of the drivers. If you look at, my husband has a company now, he's a medical doctor, and it is focused on developing new supplements. It's not medications. They're deliberately calling it not medications. They're natural products based on herbs and other natural substances, where they are really looking at ways how to support the well-being of citizens and not creating more medications that don't heal people, but sometimes make them okay. Sometimes there are ways you cannot do this with only with natural. I mean, it takes longer, and for certain conditions you cannot achieve this. But what I'm saying is, for them, the most important thing is first that they find some kind of a cure for people. It all came because of COVID, and there are many other solutions that the younger generation, this is my point, is looking at, and they're always taking into consideration the financial achievement, but also what kind of a social or environmental impact this will have.
Yeah.
Because this becomes already, a a way, a value in the way you look or commit to certain products or services you choose. It's a differentiator that you use to choose to make a choice between the products with all of the service.
And Michael Shields had asked this question. He's a partner of ours, and he's based in Dublin, I believe.
Yes.
And the short answer, Michael, is that Milena's a renegade. I mean, Milena's like an outlier in the junior achievement world, I would say. That's the short answer.
Like that, but in a way I am, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the work that you're doing in Sofia in Bulgaria is not necessarily typical of what junior achievement is doing throughout the rest of Europe or in the United States. Is that a fair statement?
In a way, yes. Even though I have to say that there are more and more organizations that are starting to look at, at entrepreneurship in this way. And we as JA organization, we're independent organizations in each country, but we're members of the global network. Yeah. And so we as a JA organization in Bulgaria, we're partnering with many other organizations that are outside of the network of, our per se network of organizations within JA.
I remember, Milena, we were in Sofia doing some kind of training or a conference or something, and you took us a couple of blocks away. I think we were at the University of Sofia, and you took us around the corner to an incubator.
Yes, and we have a pre-accelerator now. JA Bulgaria has a pre-accelerator that is partnering with other pre-accelerators, incubators in other countries, but it's not a mainstream in JA.
Yeah, but I remember coming back to the university, the training, and I took some pictures inside the incubator, and I was showing these people these pictures, and they said, "Where is that, in Silicon Valley?" And I said, "No, it's 2 blocks around the corner." And some of those teachers were from Sofia. They were from the university. And they said, "What is this in the United States?" It's 2 blocks from you. It's right here in Sofia. Just was an interesting,
But I have been working, Gary, just to, because there was that question, but I have been working in Italy, in Belgium, in France, in Finland, in the Netherlands. And what I am now saying is an example. I'm not basing everything that we're doing in entrepreneurship on JA only, even though we're part of that network. I really am talking now about a new form to me, and the difference between the way entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial behavior is encouraged in Europe, that is much more based on the stakeholder and systemic approach to any domain, and in that case, even to entrepreneurship. So there is the bigger picture in combination with the individual situation. And that collaboration that is included there, that is a bit different from my observation.
Yeah,
the US.
We've got about 10 minutes left. If there are any other questions, please post them in the chat or in the Q&A thing, the Q&A section here in Zoom. But Milena, one of the things I want to say in closing, I think that you and I, are part of the idea that you and I are both championing on different sides of the planet are the idea that we have to stop thinking about entrepreneurship in a binary way.
Yes.
We have to stop thinking of either you're going to be an entrepreneur or you're going to be an employee. And so we have to redefine the term entrepreneurship. It needs to be updated. The idea of an entrepreneur as the person that operates and organizes a business is obsolete. And I think
exactly,
if we can define it.
And I think we started with this that you can be an entrepreneur as a teacher, you can be an entrepreneur as a, even shop assistant. I tell you, you can be
Yes.
entrepreneurial, and you can be, and the current situation in the world is calling for people, all people, to be entrepreneurs, because you have nothing that is clear out there. You have no recipe for how the next days, weeks will be. You have no security for what will happen after this pandemic and how everyone will be responding. So you have to start thinking that entrepreneurs are not extraterrestrials. They are not ETs.
Right.
They are humans.
Right.
And
Right.
in fact, it's the best news.
Yeah, and like not everybody should start a business. Not everybody's equipped to start a business, but we can all be more innovative and entrepreneurial.
Yes.
And I think, that's really the message at the bottom line here. It's like we're grossly miscalculating the ability of students, of workers. I mean, I think that's really the my perspective, Milena, having interviewed all of these underdog entrepreneurs around the world, that's like I'm convinced that the way we're organizing school and work are severely limiting our access to human potential. And if we can shift from other directed learning and start to incorporate self-directed learning to prepare people for self-directed work, which is self-directed value creation, like we can change the world. And part of this conversation, like, needs to be said, in my view, is that the employee mindset that once enabled us to thrive has now become maladaptive to a rapidly changing world.
Is now becoming a burden, a weight. It's a liability.
Maladaptive. Correct.
It's a liability, if you want to
Correct.
use.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Can I propose something, Gary?
Of course.
That you wrote, we must awaken the sleeping virtues of mankind. And I say, if we awaken the entrepreneur in us, we will become more human.
That's exactly right. And of all places, Karl Marx, right? But Marx wrote about this, about like non-alienating labor. And he wrote it like he contemplated, imagine if you and I could exchange as human beings, that I would benefit, we would both benefit, not only by creating something that is a manifestation of our humanness, but seeing the thing that I created be useful to you also benefits me. And I think people don't get that. They think an entrepreneur is all profit driven, and some are, to be fair. I mean, that's, some people just get hooked on, that's all they want to do is make money. But I think the profit and the purpose motive are inextricably linked. And you can't take social entrepreneurship and pull the profit motive out of it.
Exactly.
And on the other side of it, you can't just focus on the profit motive. Those two ideas, you can't pull them apart, in my view. Any final questions for Milena before we sign off here? We're winding down. Milena, every time I talk to you, I mean, last time we met, I think we were at Boston. We were at MIT.
Yes, we were doing, because I was doing the Innovators Bootcamp program for teenagers. Yeah. You are one of our best speakers. The students loved it. Do you remember the wall with, the blackboard with all of their comments and how much they enjoyed it?
Yeah, yes. I very much enjoyed that. Very much enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Milena. Any final questions here before we sign off? We got a couple of minutes left. Is any final questions? And Milena, well, I'll share this video with you. We'll put it on our YouTube page, but feel
Actually,
free
yeah,
to.
let me say that. We'll send a follow-up within 24 hours with a recording to this and a couple links just to register for the next webinar.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for being here. Michael Shields, good to see you as well. Glad you were on the call. Michael's a great friend. He's been over through our training, and he's also a fellow conspirator and troublemaker.
Yes. By the way, I've been involved in all kinds of good conspiracies, including the overthrowing the Berlin Wall. So it just continues the trend. I think we need this revolution.
Yes, the entrepreneurial mindset revolution. I love it. Right? Yeah, this is great. Okay, Ernie, thank you for being here, Ernie. I always enjoy chatting with you as well. Great. Melina, thank you for doing this. It's great to see you.
It's really, it will give me now another, how to say, boost for the next.
Yeah.
It's an energy shot.
Yeah, likewise.
For the next few months. And thank you, Gary. Thank you for really having the courage to have this conversation. It's not an easy, I mean, worldwide, to starting this conversation and discussion. And I think it's really the right time. If not now, when? To support the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll connect in Riyadh. Are you going to go to the Global Entrepreneurship Congress? We'll hook up in Riyadh and see what kind of trouble we can stir up.
Is it being planned?
Yeah. Jonathan Ortman was our guest last month, and I talked a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe I'll see you in Riyadh, if not in Sofia or some other corner of the world.
Or some other part. No, I really hope you make it to Europe because we have a plan to go to several countries. Then Greece, the islands, boat trip.
Next
Italy,
summer, sounds great. And Joe Bird, thanks from Zimbabwe. Thank you for being here, Joe Bird.
I love South Africa. I had the greatest time. I've done training there in Joburg and in Cape Town, and you guys are some of the most entrepreneurial people. Africa, we have great partners and collaborators in Africa.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melina. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
See you next month. Before I sign off, I just want to let folks know I probably dropped the ball here, but next month we're going to have Tom Rue from NCIDEA. Tom Rue is the former vice president of entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation. He was really the person that brought the Ice House program to the Kauffman Foundation and helped us, bring that to life. He's now running a foundation in North Carolina called NCIDEA Foundation. It's really, really doing interesting things in economic development. Hope you all can join us for that next month. Melina, we'll keep in touch. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.